The Steve Dangle Podcast with your hosts, Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, and Jesse Blake.
And welcoming to the show, the esteemed Brian Burke. We're so thrilled to finally have you on, Mr. Burke. You're looking at three guys that grew up, watching you build those great Canucks teams, and obviously General President and GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. So it's a pleasure to have you on. The book title is Burke's Law: A Life in Hockey, and we got to talk about the book. We also have a ton of things in the NHL happening right now around a stalemate. But first, Brian, just want to say thank you so much for making time for us today, because it's really great to have you on.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
So I got to say that one of the first things that sort of struck me about this is we actually had Ken Reed from Sportsnet on earlier this week, and he said, last week, and I said, do you have any suggestions? And this was on the actual show, and he said, well, have your questions ready, because his answers can be kind of short. And I wondered, when you're doing these interviews now as a person in the media rather than on the other side, has it changed at all your views on hockey, and how it's covered? And you get into the book a little bit about radio hosts in Vancouver and certain things that you did, and you had your own radio show. Being on this side of it for as long as you have been now, I don't want to say, does it generate sympathy, because I don't think the media is going to get that, but how has it changed your perspective?
Well, it hasn't changed very much. My view going in was that if I can say something fairly, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say what I think regardless. But if I can say it in a more fair manner or a more even-tempered manner and not be mean-spirited, I'm going to do that. Also, if I'm not sure about something, I don't use it. So my rules are, I want to treat the people in sports the way I want to be treated. Get it right. Don't be mean-spirited if you don't have to be. Sometimes you have to say, like, even a dear friend of yours makes a bad trade. You got to say it. It's a bad trade. I don't get it. And I always follow up with the people and say, look, I'm never going to apologize for anything I say, but like you watch a draft pick go south and you say, look, they blew this draft pick. There's no way to sugarcoat it. So, but I've tried to be fair. I've tried to be honest, tried to be ethical. And I think I've done all that for 2 years. And at the end of the day, if people don't like it, that's too bad.
We've talked a lot about, in making generalizations about the media coverage of certain markets. And you've gotten to manage in, I think, 3 Canadian markets. What were the flavors, I guess, of the Vancouver market, the Toronto market, and the Calgary market, and how did they differ?
Well, Calgary and Edmonton, they've got a really hardworking group that covers both teams, and they all want the team to do well. The coverage is generally positive and supportive. Calgary's or Vancouver's different. They've got a fringe there that's it's 80% normal, and the other 20% are like on serious drugs. I mean, it's crazy. And they've got this lunatic fringe that covers the team. Like, it's very different than when I worked there. And social media, of course, when I started, social media didn't exist. And it's really bad in Vancouver. Toronto, it's just the size of the market. Like, I think the people, so a game in Calgary. We do a hockey night game in Calgary on a Saturday night. There's maybe 50 people in the room afterwards. And Toronto, after a hockey night game, there's 100. So when the team's not playing well, the volume of negativity is what gets you here. It's not that the people are mean-spirited. There's a couple of complete idiots like Steve Simmons. But by and large, the people that cover the team are conscientious, hardworking people. They want to get it right. When you play well, they say that. When you don't, they say that. But it's the volume here. And so when the team is losing and 100 different writers pick up a rock, and then, 10 throw it at me, 10 throw it at Dion, 10 throw it at Phil Kessel, 10 throw it at Randy or Ron Wilson, Randy Carlisle, whatever. So it's just the volume that defeats you here.
Is it one of those things when we hear about this all the time, and I wanted to confirm it from a guy who's been there, because we've debated this time and time and time again. It comes up on social media all the time. Is it really a factor? Is this media thing really a factor in players coming here in Toronto? That is, versus other markets? Like, is it that intense? Is it that much more? Is it that much extra for these players? And, how do you address those concerns when you're trying to sell a market or sell this market for a player?
Well, it is. It's a very real factor. There are players that will not play here. Like they'll tell me anywhere but Toronto. Like I've had players say that to me when I was in Calgary. I remember talking to one of my players and he said, I'd go anywhere. I love playing in Canada. I'd go anywhere but Toronto. He said, I don't need that much noise and that much grief. And you guys have been in the dressing room at the Air Canada Center when I was Scotiabank Arena. I mean, the reason the dressing room is that big, it's for the media. It's not for the players. We would rather have a small room where players can make eye contact and speak conversationally, not holler across the big dressing room like that. We'd rather have a small room, but the room is big for the media. And yeah, I've had players, when we traded for a player, like Mike Commissar. Mike Commissar, we signed, it didn't work out here. He did not handle this market well. He played in Montreal, so we're like, well, he knows what it's like. Surely he'll be able to adjust. And he didn't. He never adjusted to the marketplace. Francois Beauchemin was a stud for me in Anaheim. Came here, had trouble, went back to Anaheim, was a stud again. So it's a very real thing. And we would talk about it. Can this player play here? Like any Canadian market. Can this player play in Calgary? Can this player play in Vancouver? It's very different than playing in Anaheim or playing in LA. And so we would talk about it. And yes, it's a real factor. And yes, players refuse to come here for just that reason.
And then, so how do you, as Leafs president and GM, how do you sell the place? Because one thing I keep saying is, like, Ilya Mikheyev has a soup deal, and he's not getting that in most other markets in this league. Any other, probably. So how do you sell it?
Well, what I used to tell my players is, when you retire, you will look back on the time you spent playing in Canada as your favorite time, because people loved you and loved the team and loved the players. And you'll look back on it and say it was special. But we give a modified no trade clause to a player, and we usually give him 8 or 10 teams that he can elect not to be traded to. Even the Canadian kids have all 7 Canadian teams on the list. Breaks my heart because of the taxes. They want nothing to do with playing in Canada because the tax differential. So it's going to be, people ask me, how come no one Canadian team has won since 1993? That's why. Now, someone's going to do it. Someone's going to figure it out, not making excuses. But I tell the players, like in Anaheim, I think we had 2 guys had a card deal, 2 players, Scott Niedermayer and Chris Pronger, I think, or maybe Jiggy had one. In Toronto, every player has a car deal. So you make 2 appearances at a car dealership, you drive a car for free. It's a great setup. So you get a nice foreign car, or a nice Saab or something, and you make 2 appearances. Well, in Anaheim, only 2 players had car deals, and here every single player has a car deal. Like you say, Mikheyev's got a soup deal. So that's what you sell them on. There's a guy here for everything. It's funny, players don't live in the real world. Like you say to a player, if I said to Morgan Rielly, I need a new stereo system installed in my house, they've got a guy. The Leafs have a guy. There's a stereo guy that will come and do your house and do it you'll get a real good deal on it too. They've got a car guy. They've got a meat guy. You want to buy meat? They've got a meat guy. Stuff like this that you get in Canada. You want a suit? You want an Armani suit? They don't pay $5,000 for an Armani suit, even though I would have to. They pay $3,000. And the guy comes to your house and fits you, right? So there are perks to being a Toronto Maple Leaf that you don't get anywhere else. And it's a great city. So that's what I would sell.
Do you think it's inherent in NHL players to shy away from the bigger markets? Because we see in other sports like the NBA and the MLB, the top stars want to go to New York, want to go to LA, but it seems like in the NHL, the guys don't want to go to Toronto.
Well, I think it's tax driven more than anything. Like, we gave an example on Hockey Night in Canada where a local agent here, Joe Resnick, and I worked out a model of a player making $5 million. So not a star, just a good player on the Toronto Maple Leafs versus what he'd make in Vegas. So that same player making $5 million US took home $500,000 more in Las Vegas. After tax income, he saved $500,000 US every year as a $5 million player. So that's why a lot of guys don't want anything to do with Canada, is because of the tax differential.
Fair enough. Wow. I mean, yeah. And I mean, it seems to be like Montreal's really struggled with that because in Quebec, the taxes are particularly high. So there seems to be issues with that. But, Brian, when you think back about like, your time in Toronto, and obviously we want to talk about Vancouver, we want to talk about Calgary, we want to talk about the Whalers. It's funny. It seems to be, it was 1 year of your career, if I remember correctly, but the Whalers portion of your book to me is one of the most fascinating. And so I'd like to get to that in a second. But when you look back on your time in Toronto, does it feel a little like unfinished business? Does it feel like we got the team, and obviously the team made the playoffs, but, you talk about the specifics around, your departure. Does it feel to you like you were on the right track? And if you'd been given a couple more years, or been able to finish your contract, frankly, this would have been a completely different narrative for you.
Yeah, I told them I don't like GMs who stand up at the podium the first day and say it's going to take 5 years to fix this team, because they're basically asking the public to give them 5 years. And I wanted to fix it in 2 years if I could. But in the interview process, I did tell ownership, I said, we're talking 5 years here, guys. I can't fix this quickly. We got all these players with no trade, no moves. You got all this money tied up. It's going to take 5 years. And 5 years, I got fired, and that team made the playoffs. So basically, untouched team made the playoffs. So, yeah, at the time, I felt unfinished business. I thought I had that last short season after the lockout, based on a conversation I had with Nadir Mohammed from Rogers. He said, look, if we miss the playoffs this year, we're going to have to get rid of you. So I thought, okay, that means I have the season, right? 48-game season. And I didn't. But I have no bitterness about it. Like, look, this is the team got sold. So I have an easy crutch. I can come on this podcast and say the team got sold. They got rid of me. Whenever the team gets sold, they bring in their own people, which is true. But if we'd have been in first place when the team got sold, they would have had to keep me. So I didn't win enough games. And I can't stand how people aren't accountable anymore. I got fired because I didn't win enough games. Now, I thought unfinished business, yeah. I would have liked to have that season with the team and made the playoffs finally and enjoyed that, but didn't happen. And look, this hockey's been great to me. I'm not going to bitch about it. It's educated my family. I've put 4 kids through U.S. University debt-free with the NHL's help. I've traveled the globe. I'm educating 2 more young daughters here. Like, hockey's been so good to me. If I complain about hockey ever, you guys throw something heavy at me.
Okay. I've seen you around the office, man. I'm not throwing anything at you. I would never do that. I do want to ask one thing. So that team did make the playoffs. I don't know if you caught how it went. They came very close to making the second round.
Yeah.
Was there a moment, though, while they were in the playoffs or, ahead of the playoffs, whatever it may be, where you sent a message to someone at MLSE and said, listen, they win the cup this year, I'm getting a damn ring, right?
No, I don't think I ever. I mean, I left on pretty good terms. Like, Larry Tannenbaum was the guy that fired me, right? It was Larry Tannenbaum, Dale Lastman, and Tom Anselmi. I think Larry Tannenbaum is one of the finest people I've ever met. I'm still on very good terms with him. I admire him. I respect him. And I'm grateful. I got to run the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's no small thing. Like, I remember my first day, Tim Hunter was changing to get into his coaching stuff. And I was changing to work out. And the trainer had given me a bag with workout stuff in it. So I'm putting on a T-shirt that says Toronto Maple Leafs. And I hesitated. And Tim Hunter saw me do it. And he said, yeah, it's different. It's not the Vancouver Canucks. It's not the Anaheim Ducks. It's the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I used to tell our players this. I said, if we go to some remote village and sit on a stone wall in South America, the first thing that's going to walk into the village is going to be Boston Celtics, New York Yankees, Manchester United, Dallas Cowboys, Toronto Maple Leafs. It's good. It's a global brand. I remember the year after we won the cup, we opened the season in London, England. We played the Kings. And I sat out and watched the people come in. I sat out by one of the doors, and there's probably 4,000 sweaters in the arena. Like, I was shocked. In London, England, probably 4,000 people wore NHL sweaters into the building. Half of them were Toronto Maple Leafs sweaters. I remember when they played the game in the Big House, Gary Bettman called me because unemployment was like 29% in Detroit. And Gary Bettman called me and said, can you sell 40,000 tickets to that game? I said, I need 48 hours to sell 40,000 tickets. Then he called me back. He said, can you sell 60,000 tickets? I said, well, I'm going to need 72 hours then. Like, we had ticket requests from 32 countries for that outdoor game. So like the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's a global brand. So I'm grateful. I didn't have the success I'd like, but I'm grateful to say I was the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's no small thing. So no hostility, no bitterness, no bitterness in my coverage of the team either. I have 6 season tickets. If no one does better than I do, if the Leafs win, right? We're a rights holder. I'm a season ticket holder. I want them to win. I don't think they're going about it the right way, and I've got to be honest about that. But I like the people involved. I like Shanny. I like Kyle. They're nice people. They're good guys. I don't think they have the right vision for building a team.
And what I love about that is you're unabashedly unapologetic about it. You've always said this is the way, and you go into it in the book about Brian Burke teams. What do they look like? And what your top 6 and your bottom 6 look like. And if you're from Toronto, if you're from Vancouver, if you're from Calgary, and I guess parts of Massachusetts as well, you sort of get a sense of, you know what a Brian Burke team looks like. And if you look at that Anaheim team, you mentioned it in the book, it's the perfect sort of archetype. When you see what the Leafs did this offseason, Brian, Wayne Simmons, Joe Thornton, Zach Bogosian, 3 big names that, and Wayne and Zach are a little bit more on the physical side than I would say Joe Thornton is at this career. What do you think about the changes that they've made, the adjustments that they've made, and what it says about maybe the changing philosophies in the Leafs front office?
Well, first off, I like a lot of the moves they've made. I like Zach Bogosian a lot. He's a big body guy, gives them some grit. I love Wayne Simmons. But I'm taken aback by the sleight of hand here. This is a magician talking, saying we added Wayne Simmons. You didn't. You replaced Kyle Clifford. They didn't get tougher. They took one really tough guy out of the lineup and put one back. They didn't add any net toughness. They replaced Kyle Clifford. And it drives me nuts when people say, well, they added Wayne Simmons. Really? You took Kyle Clifford out, who I would argue is a tougher player than Wayne Simmons. And then you bring in Wayne Simmons. I love Wayne Simmons. I think Wayne Simmons is going to be a GM in our league someday. I think he's a good guy, good leader, quality addition. I like TJ Brody. Had him in Calgary. Quality guy. Wonderful person. Left shot D, can play the right side. That was a good pickup. They've made some positive changes. They've still got $40 million tied up in 4 forwards. You cannot have a competitive team if you've got $40 million tied up in 4 forwards. They need to move Nylander and get a defenseman. And I'm not going to come off that position until they do, because right now they're not good enough to win. So I put the teams down on paper and I put them next to one another. And this is how I say, okay, are the Leafs as good as the Boston Bruins right now? I don't think so. So I say, okay, that's one team that they can't beat, in my opinion, but they're closer than they were. Can they beat Tampa? Nope. Can they beat Washington? Nope, not for me. And that's how I do it. And so to me, do I think they're a playoff team? Yes. I like watching them play. They're fun to watch play. Sheldon Keefe's a good coach. They've got magic up front, but they're not built for playoff success. And it's not just Brian Burke teams. Look at the Final Four this year, the Frozen Four. Look at the finals. There were 100 hits in 2 of the games in the finals. Over 100 hits. This team is not built to sustain that kind of grind. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're going to have trouble. But do I like the moves they made this year? Yes. They've gotten better.
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry,
I can already see the comment section, and people's brains are currently melting out of their ears right now at the mention of trading William Nylander. If it is a money issue, and I mean, I see it too. I think it'd be stupid not to. If it is a money issue and you are able to trade Nylander, you'll still have $33 million tied up in 3 guys. Would trading Nylander even alleviate the issue, or do you need to, in your opinion, get rid of one of the $11 million guys?
Well, I think they've got full no trade, no moves, and I don't think anyone would take that kind of money. The only contract that's movable of those 3 for me would be, if I were another GM, would be Austin Matthews. The guy's a legitimate superstar. When they signed John Tavares, and again, and Steve, you know this, I hate people who change the narrative as they go along. I call things out in real time, and I stay with that position. I supported signing John Tavares, but I pointed out at the time, I love him as a player. I love him as a leader. But I said, this contract is not going to age well. And it's going to cause cap problems. Now they're going to have to give Matthews more, Nylander more, Marner more, and they did. And it's created this. It was the first. It's like a snake trying to eat a pig that's too big, right? You can't swallow it all. Now they got these 4 contracts. The only one that's readily movable that you want to move would be Nylander. I don't care about the comments section. I think
I figured that
Nylander had a good year last year. He's a good player. I have no problem with him. His dad played for me. It's not a personal thing. It doesn't compute. Like, that's the one contract, and now he's cash under cap. So he's a $7 million cap hit, but he's only $5 million cash. That's a movable contract. So to me, that's the guy that should move. And they do need a defenseman for sure. TJ Brody's a good addition, but they still need a D. And I think their goaltending is good enough. I'm one of the few that really supports Freddie. I think he's good enough, but they're not. Just put their team, forget you cheer for the Leafs, put their team on paper and put it next to Boston, next to Tampa, next to Washington, and you'll see that they're not ready. And Montreal has passed Toronto, in my mind, in terms of playoff readiness this year.
Ooh, wow.
So I thought we were having Brian Burke on, not Eric Engels.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. He was saying that too. Jeez.
Brian, I was going to ask you about that because, like, who do you think wins the All-Canadian division in the regular season? And then I was going to follow that up with who goes the furthest in the playoffs?
Montreal, to me, the answer to both questions will be Montreal. I think what they've done is, I don't think you'll ever see a $10 million goaltender again. I think in the new world, the split between the backup and the starter is going to be different. But they've got a capable backup. They've got too much money tied up at the goaltender position, but it's just for a year or two. And they can platoon their goalies now. Carey Price can go into the playoffs rested. And he's an exceptional player. He's a special player. But they've never gotten to see him at his best because he plays too much. Now they don't have to do that. They added Edmondson to their defense core, which was already good. They added Toffoli. They had trouble scoring off the wall, but they added Toffoli and Anderson. Like, I think they're a really deep, complete team. And I think they've gone right past the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of playoff readiness for me.
If you're a GM, though, I mean, it was a big stroke for Marc Bergevin when he acquired Josh Anderson for Max Domi. Obviously, it seemed like there wasn't a fit for Max under Claude Julien, so that move you could see coming. But Josh Anderson did have a pretty devastating injury last year and had a goal, and they've signed him to a 7-year contract. As a general manager, in your general manager brain, is that something where you go, I got to take the risk now because now's the time?
Well, I think Josh Anderson, he scored 27 goals 2 years ago. Then he slipped to 1 last year with an injury. To me, I think the 7-year thing is the player really wanted term. And I think you go to your owner and say, look, we're probably going to buy out the last 2 years of that. So here's the annual value of this contract with 2 years bought out. So it's really a 5-year deal. And you factor in another $500,000 a year. I think that's what probably happened. But to me, it's like a 7-year deal. There's a good chance you're buying out the last year or two of that deal anyway. And that's the way it's pitch it to your owner. I don't want to hear about the whining about buyouts in 5 years. 5 years from now, I'm telling you, we're going to buy this guy out and we're going to have some dead money.
Wow. But you got to go for it. Well, Carey Price is young.
I think Marc Bergevin's done a really good job. I think the defining moment was that they made the playoffs and their 2 young centers stepped up. So that Kotkaniemi and Suzuki both said, we can play a regular role as a number 1 and number 2 center, and we're ready now. And I think that was a revelation to everybody, including Marc Bergevin, saying, wow, they are much farther along than we thought. Suzuki's a better player than we thought. Kotkaniemi's a better player than we thought. Good for them. And I like Toffoli. They had trouble scoring off the wall. The only winger that scored any goals was Gallagher. Now they got some secondary scoring with Anderson and Toffoli. I like what they've done.
One follow-up on the Leafs and their playoff abilities. Have you seen over your career that it's possible to teach the young guys like Matthews and Hyman to play tougher? Have you seen 22-year-olds grow into that role where they can take 100 hits in a playoff game?
It's very rare. I think I'm convinced you can go to a playground and watch kindergartners and pick out the tough kids. You know, like when I was a kid, I'd fight at the drop of a hat, and that was something I didn't grow into that. There are rare exceptions. One guy we've used as an example in our scouting meetings over the years is Blake Wheeler. So Blake Wheeler, his draft year was soft skill. He was a big guy, but he played soft, really highly skilled, really desirable player, but soft skill, not bite. And now he's got bite. So the odd player mixes it in, figures it out, learns how to play with bite. But in general, no. If you got a guy who's soft skill when he turns pro, he's probably going to be soft skill till the end of his career.
Brian, I do want to hit on some other things outside of the Leafs. Is, you know, we're a Leaf-centric podcast, but like we still have other people that want to hear about other things, and we could ask you about the Leafs for the next 40 days. There's endless. So quickly, I want to say there's a couple of things in this book that I think are very, very interesting from a philosophical perspective. The first one is managing up. And one of the things you talk about when you took over in Hartford was you had an owner that seemed to be all over the place. And if I'm mischaracterizing, I apologize, but it seemed to be that the ownership situation, and obviously we all know how it turned out, was a bit chaotic for you. When you are in a position like that, you have a dream job. You finally got this, you're an NHL general manager, but you are dealing with an owner that is difficult, and a team that is struggling financially and a little bit on the ice as well. How do you manage up? And I'm looking for this more from everybody I think can manage or could benefit from a little bit of life advice that way, because it's something people face.
Well, I would say, looking back, writing the book, the one thing that I did not do well in my career was manage up. That's why I have an NHL record, even though I never played in the NHL. I've been a GM of 5 teams. No one else has ever done that. And it's a record nobody wants because it means you keep getting canned, right? So I keep getting hoofed. I didn't manage up well at all in Vancouver. I had a 100-point team the year I got fired in Vancouver. 100-point team. Playoffs, the whole bit. Like we had a great team. The building was full. I still got fired. Now, Doug Armstrong, who's a much more rational guy than I am, he survives all these different things because he's much calmer than I am. And so I think managing up is a skill that fortunately I didn't do very well. And so to me, my favorite owners were the Samuelis. Obviously, we won a cup there, but they knew what they didn't know. And that's critical for an owner. An owner has to know what he or she doesn't know. And they can't interfere on the stuff that they don't know anything about. And the Samuelis left me alone. And I tried in my interview, every single interview I went, I told the owner, I said, there's only 2 hands on the steering wheel and they're both mine. And if I look down and there's another hand on the steering wheel, we're going to have a big problem. So it's not like I didn't try to get the lines of authority and approval and all those things set I told them right in the outset, you got to leave me alone if you hire me. I told them all. So they all knew in the interview, the very first interview, first 5 minutes of the interview, if you hire me, I need autonomy. And then it didn't work out that way. Like in Hartford, Richard Gordon was the owner. He's actually a really good guy. He's a nice man. He came to my son's funeral. But he's not suited. His temperament is not suited to owning a pro team. Too impatient, too meddlesome. John McCaw was the same way. He lost a lot of interest in the team. When I first went there, he was really interested in the team. Then he met his second wife, fell in love, and she's a neat lady. But he lost interest in the team, and now I'm dealing with his right-hand man. I never even talked to the owner hardly. I talked to his right-hand man, and everything is filtered and flavored by what he sees. So that's one thing I say to GMs. And Harry Sinnen told me when I was a rookie GM, he said, get the lines of authority straight, who you report to, how often. And some owners, they want to meet once a month. Some owners want to meet once a week. But whatever they want, you've got to make that work for them.
So it's funny to me that in the first 5 minutes of a job interview, that's how you know you've made it. In the first 5 minutes of a job interview, you can tell your not even future boss, prospective boss, listen, leave me alone. Do you think there's a lot of owners in the NHL, or even just people in life, who think they want a Brian Burke to work for them, but don't actually have any idea what it's like?
I think my experience has been that all these people that own teams were very successful in their field. And then many of them, they buy a team and they immediately forget everything that made them successful in that other field. So if you're like Jerry Jacobs, so what are the what's his core business? He runs arenas. He runs concessions in arenas and national parks. Like I think they have Yosemite National Park, Delaware North is the vendor. So if you get an ice cream in Yosemite National Park, you're buying it from Jerry Jacobs. Tom Ghilardi owns the Dallas Stars. He's in the hotel and restaurant business. The Pagulas own the Buffalo Sabres. They're in the natural gas business. So these people amass this fortune and then buy a team. And a lot of it, it's a vanity purchase for a lot of owners, right? You're just a rich guy until you own a pro team. Now you're a rich guy that owns a pro team, and now you're in the paper. Now you're Jerry Jones, right? People know who you are. You're not just a rich guy. You're a rich guy with a team. And that's why a lot of these people buy the teams. And it's if they want to be involved, and I used to say to them, look, you can ride in the front seat. And when we have a parade, when we win, you be in the first car, I'll be in the last car. I want you to enjoy owning this team. I want you to have the profile that comes with it. But God damn it, when we're running the team day to day, I've got to make all those calls. And I said to them in the interview, I said, look, if that doesn't sit well with you, I will help you hire a GM that doesn't need that much autonomy. I will help you. I'll sit here right now and go through your list and tell you who you could hire that would be better suited than me. So I don't feel I ever left any doubt when they hired me of how it was supposed to work. And then when it turned out it wasn't quite that way, it was like, I think I'm kind of like saying, hey, I told you so. I warned you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just have a higher stakes life than me, man. Like, I don't remember, I never went through my phone at the Toronto Zoo and went, listen, if you don't want to hire me, my buddy Adam will do it. He'll do a great job. It's an amazing life, man.
Brian, first I want to ask you one more thing about the book, because you guys have got to pick up the book, but and then I want to ask you about the current NHL situation. So quickly, on your time as a player agent, one of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that you would say to players, much the same as you said to owners, you want to work with me? It's my rules. And that meant sometimes how they spent their money. And specifically, there's an anecdote in there about cars. And I wondered if you could kind of impart some of the rationale behind that, because you said to guys, you can spend this much on a car. That is it. Otherwise, I'm not your agent.
Yeah. They had to agree. It was a system. It was a way of life. If you wanted me to represent you, you had to save money. You couldn't splurge on things like a rookie. Like the story in the book is Peter Taglianetti was a rookie, signed with Winnipeg. And he was a really good college player, great guy, Peter Taglianetti, wonderful human being. And he went to a Saab dealership, and the limit was $14,000 that year. And it went up every year. So like when I first started doing was $12,000. So you're not going to come, if you're a rookie, you're not going to drive in a Mercedes-Benz. The older players hate that. Just be a rookie, fit in. Mm-hmm. And you had to save money. You had to save so much per paycheck. It was a kind of way of life, a discipline. Like, you're not going to retire broke. You're going to retire with money in the bank. So Peter Taglianetti called me from a dealership in Rhode Island. And he said, I got the guy down to 14.4, but he won't go down to 14. I said, put him on the phone. So I said to the car dealer, I said, one of two things is going to happen in the next 30 seconds. You're selling that car for $14,000 or he's walking out. And he got the car for $14,000. So that was, wow. Yeah, I remember when I went in to meet with Brett Hull, and I talked to him for about a half an hour, and he said, I'm content. He said, I want you to represent me. You seem like a really good guy. So I'm not there yet, Brett. I'm not sure that you're going to listen to me. So let's keep talking. And then, he bought in, and wonderful guy. Brett Hull is a great guy. I really enjoyed working with him.
It's so the situation now, and you've got a great legal background. I don't think a lot of people know this, and I don't know even if you mentioned it in the book, but you finished quite high in Harvard Law, from what I understand. Top 10 in your class. Is that true?
No, not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay, then my information from the source is wrong. But
I barely got out of there, I think.
Okay, Adam, fair enough.
Adam, he tried. He called up the prof. He said, one thing is going to happen in the next 30 seconds. Either you're going to raise my marks or I'm going to do mediocre.
So
it didn't work that time.
My oldest daughter went to MIT. She got her MBA from MIT, from the Sloan School.
Wow.
And she was worrying about, this is a girl who never had anything but A's in her life. And she's at Sloan School, the top 5% of students in the world, right? And one of her professors said, do you know what they give the last place student at MIT? Do you know what they give that student? And she said, no. He said, a diploma. So listen, I read where Barack Obama was law review at Harvard. And my daughters asked me, were you law review at Harvard? I said, no. I walked right by it every day, though. That's as close as I got to it. No, I struggled in graduate school. It was going from a small Catholic school like Providence, which I loved and I knew everybody, to a really intense academic environment like that, especially taking a year off and playing pro hockey where I really didn't do anything academically for a year. I struggled with law school.
Well, I apologize for getting that information wrong, but I do want you to apply the legal knowledge that you have, which is still Harvard law, to what's happening right now with the NHL. There's a stalemate. If the season were to start January 1st, the players who are playing in Canada would need to be here today to quarantine and get ready for training camp and that sort of thing, which would happen very soon. The owners signed a deal with the players 4 months ago and are now, at least publicly, the public perception is they're going back on it and saying, no, we need you to defer. It looks like the players could have in escrow and deferred payments over 25% of their salary. Do you think that the owners are right to do this? Do they have a legal basis to do this? And are we going to see a season in early 2021?
Well, let's go to your first question. They clearly have the right to terminate the season if they don't like the terms.
Okay.
That's in the memorandum of understanding. They have a force majeure clause anyway, act of God. They have grounds to cancel the season and not play. No question about it. This is not a classic collective bargaining situation at all. They have a deal. The issue is the deal the owners made in March to get the players back. They underestimated how much it cost to do the bubbles. It cost $75 million. They thought it would be like 35 or 40. The owners' losses are significant, much more than were anticipated. Do you remember when we locked down? I remember guys were saying, well, we'd be out about a month. Yeah. Locked us down for a month, right? Everyone talked about a month. Mm-hmm. Well, now we're still not returned to play. Fans aren't allowed in, or socially distanced fans. Like, the economic base of the NHL has been destroyed. And the players are going to have to live with that fact, whether they say, well, we made a deal in March. If that deal no longer applies, and it doesn't, by the way, like, I'm a season ticket holder with the Leafs. So I got a survey from them about 2 weeks ago. If we play fewer than 80 games, are you okay? If we have a 60-game season, are you okay with 30 games instead of 40? I said, yes. They said, okay, if we do socially distance, you might only get 15. Are you okay with that? I said, yes, I want you to come back and play. They said, okay, out of that 15, 5 will be in the upper bowl, even though I have goals. 5 of the games, I said, yes, we got to get back to play. I get it. It's not going to be exactly what I wanted. But if you play with no fans, like right now, the television revenue in basketball and football is a huge percentage of revenues. It's only about half. We're still gate driven. Mm-hmm. Like, as an industry, we're still gate driven. Live ticket sales count for about half of our revenues. That's all gone now. And so you're talking about fewer than 80 games. You're talking about sponsorship deals slashed. Like, if you're a sponsor and you buy a rink board at Scotiabank Arena, you expect 41 home games, national television, full building, and everyone sees your rink board. So it's Brian Burke's sub sandwich shop, right? Everyone sees it. Now I get 30 games. And socially distanced fans, well, I ain't paying the same freight for that. I'm cutting that rate. So that goes away. The suite revenue's gone. The live tickets are gone. And my advice to players is, it's like the Billy Preston song, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. You better get back and play, and you better figure out a way. This is not a classic collective bargaining situation. They have a deal. They get 50% of the revenue, and the owners get 50% of the revenue. So if there's no revenue, guess what? The players are going to have to eat a big pay cut. I said 40% back in April, and I'm going to be pretty close to right on that. And I don't believe this deferred money is ever going to show up again. I think they're taking a pay cut, and then deferred money is going to go by the boards, and they got to get back and play.
With that in mind, what do you think the likelihood, because you've dealt directly with the Players Association, and I realize, Bob Goodenow and people since, it's notoriously a testy relationship between the NHL and the NHLPA, as a collective bargaining often is. What do you think the chances of that are, Brian?
I'm getting more nervous. I'm getting scared now. I thought a week ago that they would make a deal within a week, and they seem to be digging in. And the league does have the right, under the memorandum of understanding, the league has the right to not play. So I had a GM tell me last week, I sat across from him, and he said, if we play, we're going to lose $60 million. And if we don't play, we lose 15. So the players better figure this out. I think we need to play. And everyone says Canada will be fine. And I do believe that. I do believe we'll get a vaccine. The sports will come back. Everything will be fine. Not so south of the border. I worry about some of those markets, whether they're going to rebound from this quickly, if at all. We got to get back and play. And the players have to realize they're 50-50 partners in a business that is in the sewer right now.
That's the hard part to absorb, though. I mean, it's tough, right? You think about it. And these are guys that are in some cases well off. They still make pretty good. You make pretty good money even to be the lowest amount of salary in the NHL. Is it a perspective issue, Brian, or what would you say is the main thing holding them up? Is it that they don't? Is it a dislike for Gary? Is it like, what do you think is the thing that's saying why don't they see it in this particular light? I guess.
And I take no joy in saying this. If you're a $5 million player and you're only going to make $2.5 million, that's okay. You're making 2.5, but that's a big pay cut.
Yes,
and that's in your life. You're figuring out your retirement and your kids and university, and that $2.5 million going away is not a small factor. And if you're an entry level player making $980,000 and now you're going to make half that, I get that it's tough. But what my advice is, you had better take whatever the worst case scenario is, and if they can borrow against the U.S. TV deal is up after the season, and there's a lot of thinking that there will be a big number out there, and they can borrow against that. So if you can do that, if that comes in, and you can repay some of these wages, like I'm all in favor of deferral instead of lost wages. I'm all in favor of that. I just don't see the math working. I don't think we're going to get anywhere near revenues to pay the deferred money back. I don't think there's going to be, I think it's a bleak landscape for this season. I think we'll be lucky to make any money at all at the gate. Have to save the broadcast money. We have to play. If that goes away, if the season goes away, then we're in a hole that I don't think the players want to look at the math of coming back if we don't play.
Fair enough. Wow.
So let's say we don't. Let's say we don't play. I think about a pair of brothers like Jack and Quinn Hughes, right? Obviously, big hockey family. They both made the NHL, both extremely talented, everything. This would be the third work stoppage of their lifetime, I believe. You ever get the sense that being a hockey fan for someone who's not as hardcore as maybe one of the Hughes brothers is too much work? It's too much work.
Figuring out the cap, talking about the business side, because often the conversation is about
figuring out why there's no games being played at them.
Yeah.
Figuring out why the thing that I love, the thing that, I want to go to one game every Christmas. That's what I ask for, or I ask for a jersey. And now this is the third time of my 20 years on the planet that they're not going to be playing. Is it too hard of work to be an NHL fan?
Well, first off, you go back. I think the key is, was the fight necessary? Like, in other words, like I was involved. I was on the front line. Mm-hmm. And that fight was essential for the sport to grow and survive. And so Gary has had 2 lengthy work stoppages, including a lost season. But we got to a sustainable business model, and we're in that model now. This, to me, this deferral or this issue is not collective bargaining. They're 50-50 partners. It's a player's refusal to say, we're going to eat all these losses. We want the owners to eat some of them. We want the owners to eat more than their 50%. We want to defer money, not lose it. And so to me, this is going to take some real hard logic on a player's mind to say, okay, we have access to the books. We know that the numbers are real. So the NHLPA gets to audit, I think it's 7 teams every year. They pick 7 teams and they do a complete audit on their books. So when I work for a team, the league would constantly threaten us. Don't you cheat, don't lie, don't misplace, don't hide one penny. Because if it comes up in the audit, we will fine the hell out of you. And so here's the books. So they know the figures are accurate. They know the damage to the business. They have to figure out how they absorb 50 cents of the dollar on that. So to me, Steve, I know what you're saying, the fatigue, because you should pick a side. So if you drive by Stelco and down in Hamilton and you see guys on a picket line, you should have a reaction in your gut. You should say, why don't those greedy bastards get back to work? Or you should say, why don't they pay those guys a fair wage? But in collective bargaining and pro sports, there's no white hat. No one sympathizes with millionaire players walking on a picket line. Like they go, okay, Joe Thornton's, making $16 million a year, whoever, Austin Matthews, $14 million a year. No one feels sorry for Austin Matthews walking on a picket line, but they don't feel sorry for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment either. There's no white hat in a labor dispute. So I worry about fans' fatigue. But I think I can say from having been part of 2 of those wars, they were necessary. We were losing so much money, we had to fix it.
Well, and there's a great part, and we won't get into it in the book, about what life was like in the NHL and in those conference call meetings before Gary Bettman showed up. Brian, you describe it as the Wild West and people yelling and screaming and all that sort of thing. And the effect that Gary Bettman has had on the NHL, whether people like it or not, and you mentioned the booing, has been pretty significant. Now, there's one guy who I think is probably second to Gary in his effect on the game of the last 30 years. And he seems like the type of guy that could stare down a freight train and win. And that's Lou Lamoriello. And he was your coach at Providence. And he is a guy who, when he was in Toronto, was one of the most fascinating sports figures we've ever seen. The master of interviews where he can give you a whole paragraph quote and say nothing at all. And he seems to be able to find holes in the CBA every single time it happens to the edge of his team. Lou Lamoriello teams don't not do well. What do you think? And I know you describe him as a bit of an enigma, Brian, but what do you think about, like, what would you say is the thing you've learned from Lou Lamoriello that stuck with you the most?
Well, I think the number one thing is Lou, he wants a way of life. Like when I played for him, it was not just about the hour and a half that we were on the ice together at practice or the game. It was a way of life, dressing a certain way, going to class. Everyone graduated at Providence College. Every guy that I played with graduated on time. And Lou would keep a guy out. Like we had a defenseman who was eligible under the NCAA rules, but wouldn't have graduated. And Lou sat him out a semester, a guy that was an important player on our team. Everyone graduated. So it was a way of life. There's an intensity about him, a perfectionist type of thing where we were expected to act a certain way. You go to class, you have good manners, you're not rude to people, you don't bully anybody. It was a way of life. And the hockey players were very popular at Providence. Like the people respected the players because we respected the school. I think it's a way of life. When you play for Lou, I was a green kid when I went there back in 1973. And when I walked out of there 4 years later, I was a man. And that's because of Lou.
And have you ever had to negotiate directly with him, like on opposite sides, a trade?
Yeah.
And what is that like? What's that experience like?
Did you win?
Well,
did you win? Yeah.
I made a couple deals with Lou, but he really skinned me on one deal. I traded a non-playoff second-round pick for Vadim Sharifyanov, the sheriff.
I remember him.
Yeah, and people are going like, who? And I'm what exactly? Like, and I called Lou and complained afterwards. I said, you screwed me on that deal. And he goes, that was your deal. You called me. So that's your deal. You called me and said, would you do this? He said, you can only complain if I come to you with the deal. If it's your deal, you shut your mouth. Now, my first big trade was I traded Bobby Holik to Lou for Sean Burke and Eric Weinrich. And Sean Burke was our team MVP, and Eric Weinrich was like our second best defenseman behind Zarley Zalewski. And it was a really good trade for us. And Bobby got them into the playoffs, got New Jersey into the playoffs. So that trade I made with Lou was great for both of us. And Pat made a deal with him. My first summer in Vancouver, Pat traded him Patrick Sundstrom for Kirk McLean and Greg Adams. Great trade for both teams. Sundstrom was really instrumental in there. Again, they made the playoffs, and Sundstrom was a big part of that. And I remember I got a call that summer of 1987. I got a call from Patrick Sundstrom's next door neighbor, and Sonny had gone back to Sweden and didn't make any provision for anyone to cut his grass. So his lawn was like a foot high, and it was overrun with rats and mice. And this guy's calling me saying, I got mice all over my house. You got to do something. So I hired a landscaping company to come and cut the lawn 4 times, like cut it down to 6 inches, then down to 4 inches, then down to 3 inches. And I sent Sonny the bill. He wasn't happy.
I bet he wasn't. And sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I do have a follow-up on the Sheriff Janov trade, because I look at so it was actually the Canucks get Vadim Sheriff Janov and a 2003rd, and you guys selected Tim Branham. The Devils get a 2002nd rounder and a 2003rd rounder. And the Devils, didn't get anyone who they used with those 2 picks. So I gotta imagine that means there's someone who you wish you had picked with that 39th pick in 2000. Who was it?
I'd have to look, but yes. Anytime I think Steve, I went 4 drafts in Vancouver in a row without drafting a player who played for me. 4 bad drafts where I went 0 for 4 drafts in a row.
Dude.
And it's just the luck of the draw. And then, like we draft Ryan Kessler, who turns into a star. We got him, I think, at 20. He turns into a star. Like, you don't think people look back and say, why didn't we take Ryan Kessler? Right. So it's like that. I moved up in the draft twice and struck gold with the Twins and with Pronger, but I've had some horrible drafts. And I made some terrible trades. Like, people always ask me, what's the worst trade you made? I said, how much time do we have? I've made a bunch of terrible trades, but
some of them are on my wall.
Great trades too. I made a bunch of great trades too.
Right.
Yeah.
Brian, another guy that I'd like to ask you about is the late great Pat Quinn, who was a legend in Vancouver and a legend here. Pat was a hell of a defenseman, tough and scary. And the understanding was that he could sometimes, I guess, be like that as a manager, but most of the time was, by all accounts, one of the best people that anybody knew in the sport. Can you tell anybody who maybe doesn't know about him, because it's been a while, and we've got a younger audience, what Pat Quinn brought to the game, what he taught you, what he did for Vancouver, and what he did for Toronto as well?
Well, with Pat, I think he was larger than life. Here's this big, tough Irishman, and he was tough. He played tough. He was tough. But the word Pat used all the time was fairness. He talked about fairness all the time. He wanted you to feel you were being treated fairly as a player, as a coach, as an employee. And he's the best listener I ever saw. Pat could sit and smoke that cigar and listen to a player talk for an hour. I remember Trevor Linden went in and talked to him one time, and he said afterwards it really cleared his head. And I said, what did Pat say? He said, you know what? Come to think of it, he didn't say much. He just listened. But Pat was really, really big on fairness. A very bright guy, had a law degree. Everything about Pat Quinn was good. He had good intentions, honorable, devout father and husband. Just like, I was so lucky to be in his orbit for 5 years, working as his right-hand man for 5 years. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, he seems every once in a while, especially the Leafs teams from the 98 season to the 2004 season when he was the GM coach. Every once in a while, when that anniversary comes up of his unfortunate passing, there's people are still, you still see Darcy Tucker, you still see Ty Domi posting about how much they loved Pat Quinn. So it's fascinating. I got to ask you too, speaking of drafts, Morgan Rielly, your indelible mark. And I know that you were excited at the time. You said you would have selected him first overall. There was a lot of people that doubted you at the time. You said, no, I know with this guy. What did you know that other teams didn't know about Morgan Rielly?
Well, his draft year, he hardly played. He blew out his knee. So he didn't play until, he played 11 games at the end of the year. But this is a kid, when the team came back from road trips, they'd get back to Moose Jaw at 3 a.m, and he'd be there on his crutches to say hello, to welcome him back home. This kind of kid he is. He's an unbelievable kid. And we had him ranked number 1. So that year, he only played those half a dozen games or so, 15 games at the end of the year. We had triple coverage we had 5 or 6 scouts at those games, whereas normally you'd have 2 or 3, and every team did. So there's 90, 100 scouts in the building watching his last 10 games. I had the video guy cut out every one of his shifts. I watched every shift he played that year twice. Watched it once, then came back and watched it again. His skating ability and his hockey IQ, we had him rated number 1. And I took him and I said, we had you rated number 1. And people say, oh, you probably said it to everyone. I said, no, I didn't say that to Nazem Kadri. We didn't have Nazem Kadri number 1. We had him at 7 or wherever we took him. So I know people say, oh, probably just said that to say it. That Morgan Rielly's a friend of mine. He's turned into a great player, but we're a little doubt about him at all. We had him number 1. And fortunately, 4 teams screwed up and took someone else, and we got him.
Yeah.
It's strange because I thought you really wanted Neil Yakupov there, Brian.
Oh, yeah. Worst interview I've ever had.
What happened?
Well, first off, he was angry that he was there. He's like, why am I talking to you guys? You're picking 5th. Why am I even here? I'm not going to be there at 5. So I hated him right out of the gate. And he was just surly and snarly. And I thought John Lilly, who was one of our amateur scouts, I thought John Lilly and he were going to get in a fist fight.
Wow.
Yeah, he's just a jerk. Just a terrible interview.
Wow.
So it went well.
That's really surprising for an 18-year-old to walk into a situation like that.
Listen, I remember Thomas Vanek, who's a great kid. Thomas Vanek came in, and we were picking, I don't know where we picked that year, 10th or 11th. And he was clearly bored, clearly thinking to himself, why am I doing this interview? There's no way I'll be there at 10 or 11. And I barked at him. I said, listen, young man, you should look at my record. I've been known to move up and get guys that I like, so start paying attention. And to his credit, he did. He sat up at attention and started paying attention and put more into the interview. I really liked him by the end of it. But first 5 minutes, he was like, what am I doing here? I'm like, wake up, kid.
Wow.
Brian, you touched on this briefly before, but we have this debate on the podcast all the time. It's just how much of the draft is luck? Because you go into it with the strategy and all these scouts, they scout all these guys, and then you go to the draft and a future Hall of Famer gets drafted in the 3rd round. So how much of that is really just luck?
Well, over time, Abraham Lincoln said, funny thing about luck is the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. So over time, I think you need luck to win the cup. So we won the Stanley Cup. We beat Vancouver 4-1, but 2 of those games were double overtime, and a 3rd game was overtime. We came that close to losing that round. And I think that team could beat every team that's won the cup since. And so that was a great team. And we came that close to being eliminated in the 2nd round with Vancouver. So you need some luck. But over time, if you're skilled at what you do, over time your record as a drafter or a trader will show up. And you'll say, well, this guy had some good drafts, had some bad drafts, but and people will remember me. They'll say, oh, drafted Chris Pronger 2nd overall, drafted the Twins. They'll be the drafts that they remember, not the ones where I took 5 guys that never played.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes comes from someone who currently works for an NHL team. And it is the best team in hockey rarely wins the Stanley Cup. First of all, I want to know what you think of that quote. Second of all, I want to know, do you think the 2007 Ducks were the best team you ever managed, or was it a different one?
Well, first off, I don't agree with that. I think very often it is the best team that wins the cup. There is an endurance part of it that's really critical. Like Dallas last year just couldn't stay in there with Tampa. Como got hurt. Hintz got hurt. And a lot of it is you got to be durable, especially those last couple rounds. It's a war. The best team I ever had, I think my guys would argue in Vancouver in like 2003, that group with the Twins and the West Coast Express line, that they could have beaten that Anaheim team. But unless you have playoff success, you can't brag. And that's why I will never tell you that the Anaheim Ducks are one of the great teams ever, because great teams repeat, and we never repeated. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think that team could beat every team that's won the Cup since, but we didn't repeat. So it will never be remembered as one of the great teams. The great teams do it more than once, and we didn't. We just had too much cap trouble the next year. Taylor retired, Scotty retired, then they both came back, and we were scrambling. But I think that team, and not just Brian Burke's view, because this will sound arrogant. Be like, oh, Brian Burke. People don't like me anyway. They'll be like, he's saying his team was the best team ever. I'm not. What I'm saying is I think that team could have beaten every team that's won since 07. And our players believe that too. Like I had this conversation with Chris Pronger and Teemu Selanne, Scott Niedermayer. They believe that too. So it's not just my view on life.
Well, your view on life is why the book's worth reading. And it's been, Brian, I know that you were well past the time that you graciously allowed us to take. So I out of respect for you, I want to wrap, but I don't want to kick you off there either. We love having you. And the book is incredible. Pick it up today. Any hockey fan is going to love this. It's Brian Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey with Stephen Brunt. Brian, thank you so much for your time. We hope this isn't the last time. We hope that you come back because especially when it comes to what's going on in the NHL right now, very few people have been on both sides the way you have. Fascinating to get your opinion on it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
So
that was very good.
Yeah.
Wow, was it?
Yeah, we got to have him on again. There's so much.
Yeah.
There's just even like his Leafs tenure alone. And then I was like, God, there was so much Canuck stuff. We didn't even really get to talk about the Sedins. He mentioned Nazem Kadri.
We didn't get Calgary at all. Like
we didn't get Calgary. I wanted to talk about the Nazem Kadri thing with Brian Murray. We're on camera. Who's the kid you want? Nazem. Well, we're going to take him. Like, it's just what a life. What a life. This is why I felt stupid writing my book. Like Brian Burke is twice my age and he's lived 20 times the amount of life. That is
you could just write several books then.
Yeah, Steve, you'll have a part 2. Don't get so down on yourself.
May or may not have discussed.
And by the way, the team is. Well, I bet you are. I bet the team is still ruining your life. So the title doesn't need to change. Like I think you're okay.
This team is still ruining my life.
That's right.
My love for them is still there irrationally. So
I think I can predict. I think I can predict what the reaction to some of the comments that he had or is going to be. But that's what you get when you talk to Brian Burke. Honesty, it's how he feels. It's the same thing with Ken Reed last week. And so I think if you've got an opinion on anything, you got to be open to people challenging it. So I hope that you at least keep an open mind about it. It's a different way of looking at the game. Great stories. And honestly, the book is phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that because Brian was on. I read it a month ago.
Who narrates it?
Brian reads it.
He reads it himself.
Yeah.
Oh, well, now I'm getting the audiobook for sure.
Yeah, now you got to have him. You got to have him do it.
I was thinking if Brunt did it, I would really like that as well. But there's something about reading a biography in the voice of the person who wrote it. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And like Ken said, it's a slog. It's not fun. So it's amazing that he did that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's sort of on what we're talking about. But I think it's a contentious debate.
Okay.
Adam, you listen to a lot of audiobooks.
I do.
Are you allowed to say that you read a book when you listen to the audio version?
I think you can.
What should you say?
The point is, well, I just say I read it just because for ease. But yeah, I listen to all the books that I read. And I think what the key out of any book is you're supposed to learn something. It's some sort of information retention, some sort of point of view change. And if you're in university and you're studying it and you need to know for an exam, well, yeah, maybe listening to the book is good for you, but you probably need a hard copy of it as well, so you can go back and quote things directly and that sort of thing. But if you're listening for just the pleasure of reading or the pleasure of hearing stories, then I don't see a difference. And so, you know, because I'm not in academia, my whole job is entertainment. I want to pull highlights from stories like Brian's and bring it up on the show. And, you know, and just sitting down for the last couple of days and going, what points do we want to hit? There were so many stories from the book that I wanted to pull from. I'm glad we got the agent story, and I thought that was really cool. You know, I'm glad. I think that anybody that struggles a little bit with reading as well, like I do, not that I can't read, I can obviously read, but it's one of those where it takes me a lot longer than the average person to get through the same amount of material. And that became very obvious to me when I was in grade 9, grade 10, when the reading starts to pile up. And I'm a kid that read all the Harry Potter books, read all the books, loved, you know, all the stuff that we had to do, loved reading. Don't have time. Flat out do not have time to sit down and read anymore. So this is the way I can consume it. And I absolutely think you can. And anybody that says you can't, I think that's a narrow mind. But believe what you want. I don't care.
Do you think?
Do you bother me? I'm not going to get hung up on that.
Do you think the act of reading, though, is important to reading? Like sitting down and looking at the words on a piece of paper.
Well, and that's what we do every day. Like, I mean, if we're talking about, think about what it takes to prep this show. So when I'm sitting down to prep this show, and we all kind of prep in different ways. Steve's job is as a reactor. That's what we call it behind the scenes. Steve knows this stuff inside out because he lives and breathes it. Jesse, you and I have to dedicate study hours to this because our main job is not in sports. And so, you know, if our main job was in sports, we would still have to study as much, but Steve sort of just pulls things out of the air, whereas I have to write things down and have details. So, you know, if I'm going through an article from Chris Johnston or James Myrtle or any of the other Eric Engels, any of the guys that we've had on this show, you know, you have to sit down and you have to read it and highlight the things that you think are important that you wanted to bring up and discuss. There was an interview that The Athletic did with the new GM, Armstrong. I forget his first name though, in Phoenix, in Arizona. That was, what's that?
I don't know. Doesn't matter.
The guy's nuts. Like I had it all prepped out and ready to go about like how he was living. And I was like, we got to run through this. This is crazy. This is one of the craziest interviews I've ever read. And, you know, that's not available in audiobook form. I had to read it. But we didn't get to it. And then, you know, they drafted who they drafted. And that became the story rather than this guy's bananas because he's, you know, like he's living in a hotel room across from the arena. And like, it's just it was a very interesting story onto its own that we just never got to do. So yeah, I think it's very important to sit down and read. And I do every day. It just doesn't happen to be like literature. When I want to listen to a book or when I want to absorb a book, whether that's a Jane Austen book or a Brian Burke book, say that 5 times fast, it's going to have to be an audiobook. I'm a single dad. My kid's not even in daycare yet. So I'm rushing around all the time. There's no way. Like, when would I sit down and read? When is that going to happen?
I've listened to the Harry Potter series like 7 or 8 times. I don't think I'd be through the Order of the Phoenix yet if I had to sit down and read it.
Right.
I don't. I think it's consuming information. I do think reading is important, but
absolutely. It's the most important.
It's just, I feel like just
the Harry Potter books are a good example because do you feel like right now you missed out on some of the experience of consuming Harry Potter? The fact that you didn't sit down and look at the words on a page and use your imagination in that way. No.
There's only a handful of things. Like, for example, I listened to the Jim Dale audiobooks. I forget the other guy, but because of his accent, I literally did not know certain characters' names. Because of like, okay, the Phoenix. Who's the Phoenix? Who's the bird? What's the name of the bird? Dumbledore's bird.
Fox.
I thought the bird was named Forks. Because he said folks.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
So Forks. Why is the bird named Forks? I don't know. Why is the guy named Dumbledore? I guess they all have weird names.
Right.
You could say the same thing when you read the book because I could not, it took until I saw the first movie before I knew how Hermione was pronounced. I'd never seen that name before, but I read it. But I brought it to my parents. They'd never heard of it. You know, you couldn't Google that back in the day. And so it was when I was in grade 6 reading the first one, which I had the Sorcerer's Stone, not the Philosopher's Stone. I think it's the British version or something.
We had the debate and I don't remember.
the thing was like, so sometimes you don't know it that way either. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think if in a Harry Potter context, yeah, you probably can do the audiobook and do it. If you're reading an overview of a historical event, I'm sure that an audiobook will give you a good overview, which is why, as a fan of history, I like to read those types of books or listen to those types of books. But if I was going to be a history professor, I probably could listen to some audiobooks, but I'm probably going to sit down and citation and firsthand accounts and all the things that you need to do and only reading can give you. So does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting conversation just with the different ways we're going to be able to consume media, like as we progress through our lives. Like you would never thought like, hey, I listened to this 2-hour podcast on curling and now I learned all this stuff about curling, or I listened 2 hours a week about hockey. And then back in 10 years ago, it's just like, no, I read an article in the newspaper. So it's just funny to hear how
Damian Cox,
right,
and Steve, the only two writers.
the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail has a feature. If you're a subscriber, if you go to an article online, you can click on it and it will dictate the entire article to you. And it's okay. I could sit there still for 10 or 15 minutes and read the whole thing. Or there was an article one day I listened to in this room while I hung stuff up on the wall. So I'm multitasking. I'm consuming information. I'm adding to my room. Like, I don't understand I understand the conversation of, do you see the merits of this versus that? But I feel like a lot of book nerds basically go, you listen to it. And like, it's just them huffing their own farts. And we get it. You read.
You don't want to take away from people who enjoy, like, that's also an activity.
No,
that's okay. Read for an activity.
But don't denigrate my way of consuming the same thing. Right? Which is I'm not saying readings for fucking losers. Like, you know what I mean?
They are different experiences.
But they're different experiences.
Sure, 100%.
And if somebody wants to say that their experience of reading is different from their audiobook, so they say that you guys performed a different activity, I respect that. Nerd.
Let me ask you this. Let me flip the question on you. Does an author actually need to physically write their book? And I'm talking about physically write their book.
No.
Because
what do you mean?
The reason I ask is that one of the early 20th centuries. We're in the 21st century. So yeah, 20th century. One of the great authors of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, never sat down and wrote his own shit. He would walk around his office. He would dictate he had 2 secretaries, and he would dictate to them, and they would write. He never, ever, that included, obviously he had volumes of books that he wrote. He wrote history books. He wrote his memoirs on World War II. He wrote his memoirs, he wrote about the history of the English speaking people, which is one of the things he's known for. And many other works, plus gargantuan sized speeches, because that was the style at the time. Let's talk for 4 hours today, one person in Parliament. And he would never sit down and write that. It was him walking around the room, pacing. And his secretary sometimes had a really hard time understanding him because he would mumble under his breath and expect you to pick it up. So my question is he still an author because he dictated it and never typed it out and never wrote it down?
Yeah, I think a lot of authors today even do that. It's like there's like somebody, like say like Tom Cruise is going to write a book. He hires a writer and he just dictates these stories to the writer and they write them down. Right. So I think I don't think it's the same conversation in the same way.
I just flipped the question. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Tom, I know you're one of the richest people in the world, and we have this method of writing a book that it will make it so much easier for you. No, I have to sit there and do this myself, and I need to type up this entire paragraph and then read it and then hate it and then delete it and start over again. And no, he's Tom Cruise. He doesn't have to do that.
Let the experts write. Let the writers write. You tell the story because you have the story. Let the writers write it.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, if you're not a good writer, I have no problem with you just telling someone your story and them writing it down.
Or be super arrogant and insist on doing the whole thing like I did. Just no.
Well, Steve,
I know how to do this despite never doing it.
You're literally a writer.
Yeah, that's what you do. Like if I wrote a book, I don't think I would. I think I would have to write it with someone because I wouldn't know where to start. It'd be too big. It'd never get done.
Well, that's hard, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I like that Ken is reluctant to call himself an author, and he's written like 6 or 7 books. And here's me with one. I'm like, I am an author. I have written a book. Sorry. Let me correct myself. I've written a best-selling book. I'm an author. I'm a best-selling author. And Ken's all bashful about it. Poor Ken. Oh, sorry. On the note of where the hell do you start? Adam, this is great tip for when you're an author. So I did,
Steve.
I took a marker board and I literally bullet pointed my whole life. I wrote down, before I bullet pointed, I wrote down a list of the most important stories that I can think of. Most important stories, most important events. And then the first day I actually had to sit down and write it. I was like, what's the first story that comes to mind? And it was, if you've read the book, it was the story from when I cried at the zoo one day because basically someone went, wait, you've never played hockey? How the hell do you think you're ever going to play in hockey? And I had told that story recently. So I wrote that story down, start to finish. And by the end of it, I'm like, and there is a chapter. So now I have to, basically it's like it's like completing a puzzle. So like I had this, and everyone completes puzzles differently. So at the beginning of COVID, my wife and I did this enormous African savanna, and she does puzzles by getting the entire border. She does the she gets all the border pieces because they're easier to find, and then she tries to figure out which ones go together. Blah, 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 blah. The way I do puzzles and the way I did my book is I went, these pieces are a giraffe. These pieces are an elephant. These pieces are, but we worked really well together because she did the border and I filled it in.
Yin and yang.
It was great.
I like that. I like that. Do we got so Evander Kane and Jake Paul?
No, I want to talk about this.
So first off, is this shit for real? Are they actually going to fight? And because I can't imagine that Evander Kane can do that because of the fact that probably, you know, assuming there's a season, around the time he wants to fight, which is early September, that's training camp. Mm-hmm. And he's going to go to a boxing ring and then show up at training camp?
No, so there's 2 things there. One, in the collective bargaining agreement, Evander Kane, unless he wants to be in breach of contract, would have to ask the San Jose Sharks for permission to get into a punch-in-the-face contest with someone who has 2 punch-in-the-face wins, which they will absolutely not allow.
But if I'm Evander Kane and Triller is like, hey, we're going to pay you $25 million to go fight Logan Paul, I'm like, fuck my hockey career. He's like, give me a $25 million check. I'm going to,
you know what?
Whatever my contract. You know?
Jesse's onto something. This could be a brilliant introduction to a far more lucrative career. Here's the problem, Jesse. He's not going to get that kind of money. Roy Jones Jr. got 3. Evander Kane's not getting shit. Mike Tyson got 10.
I think, honestly, this sucks to say, but Jake Paul's bigger than Roy Jones Jr.
In terms of draw, right?
Bigger.
In terms of
worth more money.
No one watched Roy Jones versus Mike Tyson for the boxing. Get out of here. You wanted to
just stopped
see
at no one watched.
50-plus-year-olds get
no one watched.
People did watch that.
I watched.
Over the week on Saturday.
Really?
It did numbers, yeah. On paper.
I'm not going to lie. So I watched a video while I was doing something else. Like I had it on. And then this flurry of commentary came on. And I was, what the hell? So I watched a video. It auto-played to an illegal stream.
Oh.
I was just like, what? And it was right before the Jake Paul-Nate Robinson fight.
Oh.
It was the biggest stroke of luck. I was like, okay, well, I wasn't planning on watching it. I was just going to follow along on Twitter, but I guess I'll watch it.
Well, I think Jake Paul is, you can hate him, and I don't blame you. The guy,
You're right.
The
By
guy,
the way, it's
right.
1.2 million pay-per-view buys at $49 each. It's not too bad.
And how much of that was Jake Paul?
Siri, what's 1.2 million times 50? $60 million.
Thank you, Siri.
Not a bad take home. Plus advertising.
Yeah.
10 of that.
Yep.
You got to hire Snoop Dogg.
Plus, if the world's back open, you sell tickets.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's you could turn that into $100 million event.
That's $100 million after a Saturday night.
Easy. Easy.
So where this all comes from, by the way. So basically, Jake Paul beats Nate Robinson in a boxing match. We can talk about that. And then Evander Kane is one of several professional athletes to say, "Oh, I'd beat his ass. I'd beat him up." Logan Paul gets, well, and then he said something sexist talking to Ryan Reeves and Robin Leonard. But there was I can't even remember what he said. It wasn't nice. Anyway, then Logan Paul was on a podcast and he sees that Evander Kane called out Jake Paul.
Do you want me to play it?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes, he's with his mom, isn't he?
I was wondering who that was.
I don't know who it is.
I think it's his mom.
Really?
Does he do a podcast with his mom?
I think so.
I would if I was
with that.
him.
Dude, I got to be honest. I
rich.
don't follow them because I can't. Like I just can't.
I don't.
All right, here's the audio.
Okay.
Evander Kane? San Jose Sharks? What is that exactly? Says some sort of fish, an aquatic animal who lives in San Jose? Huh?
Yo, Jake Paul, I'd wreck you.
Yo, Jake Paul, I'd wreck you. Easy to beat up guys with no experience and much smaller. What the f*** are you do? I think he's sure. Put him on the list. I'll do it. Does Jake Paul versus Evander Kane, is that a headline fight? How many buys does that get? How many people?
Not that many.
Right?
I don't know who Evander Kane is.
No, exactly. So
there's your answer.
And that's no disrespect.
Or does he just do it because he'll get another fantastic knockout?
No.
Especially if he's he an active?
Yes.
And okay, so when is he going to train boxing? We'll go through it again. I'll put
what I'm saying. It's not going to happen.
$250,000 down this time.
So this $250,000.
He's dropping it. Well, that's just on betting, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's your answer right there.
Oh.
Beyond the fact that Evander Kane would probably be in breach of contract, although he could say "fuck my contract," like Jesse said. Beyond the fact that he would be in breach of contract, why on earth? Nate Robinson is a far bigger name in retirement than Evander Kane is in the prime of his career. He is. So there's no reason for that. You
almost a slam dunk competition. Like he's a household. He's a big name.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but like, why would a YouTuber waste their time on an NHLer?
Yeah, exactly.
And Logan Paul, I think, was making a terrible joke when he's like, "Oh, the San Jose Sharks, what is that?" I do genuinely believe that person who lives in California does not know what the San Jose Sharks are. I do genuinely believe that.
Yeah,
when I went to California, I was looking for hockey stuff. I was looking for like a classic Ducks hat. And I went to a hat store and you could get every hat in the entire world. And there was like one little corner. There was like Sharks, Ducks, Kings. And that was it. That was it. Like, and you really had to look for it. No, they don't care. They don't care. So there's that. Do we want to bother talking about who would win?
Adam, your internet's really spotty right now.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I couldn't tell if you said something.
You're calculating.
Okay. No, I sort of half said something. I think it just speaks to what Brian Burke was saying, which is you better play this season because that would be bad if you don't. Like, you're just barely tenuously hanging on to some of those American markets. Maybe not in LA, but you gotta play. Mm-hmm. So I guess, do we want to talk about who would win? I don't know if I know enough about boxing or care, to be honest. Like, I don't know if I can passionately talk about this subject. If you guys have a passion,
I don't think I could passionately talk about it. But
the floor is yours. No. Okay.
It's a celebrity boxing match. Do you remember when we were kids and they used to run celebrity boxing on Friday nights?
That was insane.
That was crazy.
Same shit, except for older. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
They had
it is an old format.
Yeah, so some of the matches that they had were absolutely outrageous. But I do find it very funny that Jake Paul, who did knock out a former professional athlete, everyone's like, oh man, this guy's a real deal. He has not fought someone with a professional fight before.
Yeah.
He has. Listen,
he's not the real
deal. Probably
he's
beat you or I. He's a better boxer than you or I, but that doesn't mean he's good. It barely means he's a professional boxer.
He's not boxing champ right now. I'll give him that. Like,
sure,
that's a good way of putting it. I don't even know the first person he beat. By the way,
you want to see something fun?
The other YouTuber,
55-year-old Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. There you go. There's a fight I'd watch.
I'd watch that.
I'd watch the hell out of that.
I'd watch all 8 seconds of it for sure.
Yeah, I think Mike would win.
It might be less
on technique alone. I think he'd win.
Probably
on punches alone. Jake could block him and still get wrecked. But
yeah,
it's what the whole conversation around this, especially Jake Paul or Logan Paul, it doesn't matter, versus Evander Kane, and just seeing people talk about it. A lot of people have never been in a fight before, and just looking at how they talk about it, thank God you haven't, because you have no idea. You have absolutely no idea. Evander Kane is a professional athlete, and he's been in hockey fights before. It's not the same as a boxing match, you nutcase. It's nowhere near. If it was a fitness competition, Nate Robinson would have killed Jake Paul. He would have killed him. Evander Kane would kill him. Mm-hmm. If it was a hockey fight, Evander Kane would kill him. Of course he would. But it's a boxing match, and it's completely different. It takes more than being a tough nut. It takes more than being in great shape. That so many people have a really in-depth opinion on this who have never been in a fight, and thank God, because you die.
All right. This is what we've all been waiting for.
Okay.
1 year of training. You guys are both only doing boxing training. Who wins, Adam Wilde or Steve Dangle?
Well, I got a shitty back. Adam's got a shitty jaw.
He's got the back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, bad back, bad jaw.
That's a tough one.
I think Steve wins the press conference for sure. Mm-hmm. He's gonna, when we do the weigh-in, Steve's gonna win that one. He's better at John than I am for sure.
Well, when we do the weigh-in, Steve's gonna lose because he'll go over.
Right.
So already I'm giving up a bunch of my purse to Adam. So that's tough.
Jesse would have to stand in the middle with his token hand between both of us as we went nose to nose. It's a big hand.
Jesus.
Bigger than that looked like a gigantic spider, Jesse. That was a big hand.
It looked like you held up something you bought at a baseball game.
Yeah. That's a big hand.
What's this? There's something in the air. A Jack Skellington hand.
I got that too. It's a good one. I think you win that. I don't know, man. I think it's a toss-up. Like, it depends on if Steve's backs out, I for sure win.
Oh, you whoop his ass.
But I think Steve's got more power than I do, and I don't have a whole lot of technique. So what does that leave me with?
No, you have a year of training though.
I know, but if we're both training at the same rate, our relative skill will probably increase the same. I don't
unless you work harder.
Unless I work harder.
You're the best.
I don't know. I feel like Steve wins this one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna give it to Steve.
Okay.
I'd also be worried about my fake teeth.
In a fight between Adam and I, who wins? The cringe subreddit.
That's true. Good point. Yes.
No matter who wins, it's them.
Everyone loses. Everyone.
Yeah, man. People were making fun of Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr.
Oh, we would get killed.
Imagine.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh my god. It's if you've ever just looked up random street fight on YouTube. Oh, don't give me that look like you've never been on World Star. Shut up. If the vast majority of people have no idea what they're doing and it looks sad. You're always like, you all imagine you would get into a fight like friggin' Goku and it's just no one knows how to throw a punch. It's all these overhand punches It's oh god, watching the average person fight is sad.
How much money would we have to raise for charity for you guys to do like a boxing match? For like,
I'll just tell you, I won't. I just tell you that I would rather raise money any other way. I will not step into a ring. I will not. I wouldn't take the risk. It just wouldn't be worth it. I need my brain, so I can't.
No, we put those like helmets on you and stuff.
So wouldn't do it. You can still get a concussion.
Yeah.
No, not interested. I'm not into intentional concussions anymore. They're just not that exciting. So
that's great, Adam. $5 million.
I would do road hockey or something like that, but I won't do.
You do that anyways.
Yeah, I know. I just won't do. Sorry, Steve. I won't fight you.
There's this I forget what it's called, but it's basically boxing matches for charity. And I want to say it's people get together from different agencies throughout Toronto or the Greater Toronto area, and usually every year someone from Sportsnet, almost always behind the scenes, gets into a boxing match for charity. And every time I see them around the office, I'm just in awe. I'm just like, God, you're so much braver than me. Like you're so much the nads it takes to go, yeah, I'm going to get into a fist fight with a person I've never met in front of people, and it's going to be streamed, and it's going to be in front of all my coworkers. What if you get knocked out in front of all your coworkers? And for the rest of your professional career, they've seen you get knocked out in person. You can't tell me that doesn't affect your life.
I think it does.
Everyone I know is one.
Agency Wars.
Agency Wars.
Yeah.
There used to be an agency idol as well, where media and so they go and they'd sing. And I remember it was offered to when I was an intern, it was offered to any of us on the show if we wanted to do it, and all of us were like, hell no, like not a chance. Because Idol was huge at the time, and everybody wanted to pretend that they could sing. It was like, you just got to know your lane. That's not my lane, man.
Anyone like I still remember we had Moet Idol at our high school, and still to this day I remember performances from it. That was half my life ago.
Yep.
And I just admire the strength that it took to do that. And I was in theater, but I feel like it takes so much more bravery to sing. It
does, because you can miss very easily and everybody knows it.
Do you remember Khalil's performance?
Yeah, he was great.
Of course you do, because it was one of the most magical moments that I experienced in high school. There was this kid who was like if Jesse decided to just be a nerd. Like if Jesse had never found baseball. Like he was 6'4", like he was
Easily.
really tall.
He was 6'4" in grade 6. He was very tall.
Yeah, and he just never spoke. And he gets on stage and he's holding the mic like this, and he's doing
what was it?
Just Friends by Music Soul Child?
Yeah, I think so. I think that sounds right. I hosted the show. Shows how good out memory I
am.
Host
the show?
I was the host. Yeah.
Oh, no way. Steve,
dude, I've been hosting shit since forever. It's like, it's wild.
But that song starts with this long beatbox intro, and he's literally sitting there holding the mic in both hands, standing completely still. And the whole crowd is everyone in the entire 1,100 kid school is muttering, and they're laughing, and they're like, oh my God, this kid's going to get goofed on. And he just starts belting it out. And the entire auditorium goes nuts.
Yeah, just brought the house down. It was amazing.
That was a decade and a half ago, and I remember it like I'm sitting there.
Yeah, boy.
This all came from
write a book,
Jake Paul versus Evander Kane.
I'm going to have to, Steve, if I ever did write a book, I'd have to sit down with you, because I can't remember half the shit I've seen. So any of the things mutually that we have done together, I'd be like, I got to defer to Steve on this, because you jog things that I'm like, oh, I remember that now. But I have that, it's like that brain file folder. I'm not able to just pick things out. When people jog my memory, then I can remember it, but I don't just pull it out. It's weird. I don't know.
I drive SL absolutely insane, because she asked me to do something and I'll go to do it. And if something distracts me on the way, it doesn't get done. There's a letter. I was like, but I also got to bring in the recycling bins and I never mailed the letter. But I remember Khalil's performance at Moet Idol in 2004 or whatever it was. Like it was yesterday. Yeah. If you ever write a book, just
We're gonna have to
Ask your boy.
It'll be the two of you consulting with me on it because I'm gonna have to. Jesse remembers shit that we've done because Jesse and I worked together. What is it? 7 years now, Jesse?
Yeah, about that.
So yeah, I mean, on this show, you've been on 6 years. So we had been working together a year before you'd even gone on the show. So I think
it was 2014.
2014. So 6.
That's when I graduated.
It's gonna be 7 years in February.
7 years in Feb. Yeah.
Wow. Fuck. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We're both were relatively young, but I think Jesse would remember a lot more about the things we've done than I would. I just don't remember them. Should we do the press conference? Because I know you solicited Jesse. We've got about 10 minutes left.
We got 10 minutes, you guys?
Let me just grab a drink and I'll be right back.
Oh, better be Patron. All right, Steve, Adam's gone. Let's do a separate podcast. What should we talk about?
By the way, do you guys want to see something funny?
Yes.
Do you want to see what a bachelor's fridge looks like?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
no.
hang on.
Is this for
Am
the
I
show?
about to be very sad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll show it.
Yeah.
Am I about
If
to
I
see
unplug
Lenny's
my mic, is
apartment?
it going to go through the computer?
What?
You think? If I unplug my mic, is it going to go through the computer? I got to show
Yeah,
you.
if you change your Zoom, so you'll hit the little thing and it'll set select microphone. Just do MacBook Pro microphone.
You know what? Fuck it. I'll just carry it. All right.
Okay.
You guys, you want to see something really
All
funny?
right, we're going to Adam on house tour.
Welcome to my house.
I just saw your toilet.
Yeah, if you want to see my toilet, I can take you in. So this is my kitchen. It's not very big, but there it is. And then here's my fridge. Okay, you ready?
Oh, I'm so depressed.
So there's some almond milk. There's some
Got a lot of bubbly.
cauliflower. I got some bubbly.
Please don't tell people how I live.
So
These
can
are
you
chicken
describe
fingers.
it for the people listening?
Yeah. Okay. So on
For
the,
the
first
non-user
shelf, on the top shelf, I have one egg. This carton has one egg in it.
You can't do shit with one egg.
Look, there's just one egg. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the top shelf where you keep the eggs.
Oh my God.
One egg. Yeah.
Then you've got a container full of chicken fingers here. Sid Sixera would be proud.
Can you show the chicken fingers? How old are they?
They
green.
are at least 5 days old. I think this is.
Oh, bro, throw those out.
They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them.
I know
Those are-
how
are those
much you
Longos?
make.
Is that a
Go
Longo
get other
special?
food. Oh my
Metro?
God.
Yeah, they're good. They're
Is it Longos or Metro?
Metro.
Metro.
Actually, no, they're Loblaws. They're Loblaws. Because
Oh, Loblaws.
Loblaws thing. I've got a couple hummuses left. A couple hummi left.
What do you eat with it?
Well, the broccoli and cauliflower.
Oh, okay.
And then
How old is the broccoli and cauliflower?
4 days. 4 days.
And that's also from Loblaws,
yeah.
from the salad bar.
I went 2 days in a row, and then I've got some chicken in there that probably needs to be thrown out because I never cooked it. Some rice in there that I never finished, and then I've got a whole thing of beer
Beer that you don't
bottom of my
drink.
fridge that I do not drink because I'm not a huge drinker. So it just sits there, and then I've got condiments,
Oh.
and
This is how you live?
this is well. I also have I have Everly's food as well, but I have to grocery shop. I don't. She's with my mom today, so I have to grocery shop. But that is how we do it in the single world. Pretty crazy. Are you depressed?
Yeah.
Are you sad?
A little bit.
Really?
The chicken
God.
fingers. I wasn't
Oh,
happy.
there's nothing wrong with the chicken fingers. They're fine. What? What's the problem? I don't understand.
Salmonella is the problem, Adam.
No, salmonella's before.
No, you're right. Yeah, they're cooked. You're fine. You're
Anyway,
fine. We got to
I
get
just-
Jim Woodgett back on.
I just
Dr.
looked
Jim
at that. I just looked at that and thought, wow, that's depressing looking. So I thought I'd show you what my fridge looks like right now. Oftentimes it's fuller than that, but not all the time.
I don't feel better.
Jesse, do you have some questions for us?
I think so. After that, I don't know how we recover. But
Yeah, let's start with my
keep
first
going.
question. Why?
Why?
so,
Are you okay? Do you need a hug?
Zaid K 1996 writes, is Gary Bettman's time coming to an end? What do you guys think?
Absolutely not.
No. You're associating how much you like Gary Bettman with how good of a job he does. And you have it reversed. The amount that you hate Gary Bettman is a barometer for how
proportionally
good of a
correct.
job he does.
Yes.
If you hate him, he's doing great. Because his job remember Brian Burke talked about, no one cares about millionaires versus billionaires. He is on the side of the billionaires. Gary Bettman makes more money per year than all but 24 players in the NHL. And it's for this very reason. It's probably less than 24. How many players in the NHL make more than $8 million?
Not many.
Not many. And half of them are on the Leafs.
Yep.
Not many.
True.
He does the owner's bidding, so therefore he does a good job. And as for what Berkey was talking about earlier, it sure is bleak, isn't it? It sure is bleak, because everything I've read involves me going, the players are absolutely in the right. And what Berkey said, and I'm paraphrasing, is tough shit. And he's right.
I figured he'd have an interesting take on that. Whether you agree with it or not, I mean, he is right. They do need to play. Because here's the thing, you either get 50% of your salary or you get 0% of your salary.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a tough position to be in.
Yeah, and we're not talking about
the morality of it.
Walmart employees unionizing. We are talking about NHL players.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, he mentioned Stelco. Shout out Stelco. I have a cousin who works there.
Oh, okay.
Shout out Stelco. That was a very random reference by Berkey, because I was like, oh, my ears sparked up, I was like, I know somebody who works there.
Next question, Jess.
Last question from Chad Wheel. Should Chad put the Maple Leafs reverse retro jersey on his Christmas list?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? If you like
If you want it. Listen, we go way too extreme with how we talk about jerseys, man. We go way too extreme. I wasn't a huge fan of the reverse retro jersey. And you know what? As someone who has a large social media presence, maybe I should have shut the hell up, because then I log on and I see Nasher with his Columbus Blue Jackets one. And I'm like, maybe if I was nice, I would have got one too.
Right.
But I wasn't feeling it. But I also had one of the Leafs pajama jerseys. I made a chair out of it afterwards. I'm sitting in it right now. It's still for the team that I love. And if you're a hardcore fan of the Leafs or any team,
and you like it, do you like it?
Yeah, just
like it. Do you like it? I don't know. It's Jesse and I have been in this debate a million times about can you get your own name on the back of a jersey? Fuck, man. If I'm paying, I'll put I'll put fuck you on the back of it. I paid for this. Probably wouldn't be allowed. Honestly, I wouldn't be allowed into the arena, but the reality is, if you pay for it, you want it, you do what you want. And
I'm not kidding. There was a dude who I would frequently see at Marlies games who had a Marlies jersey with the number 69, and I'm pretty sure the nameplate was Goofball. And
I have one that's a Jerkshire 69.
You have a Jerkshire, yeah. Because
Which
why
he
not?
has.
Which does he? I hope he does.
Yeah.
No, I auctioned that off last year.
Oh, right. I wonder who's got it now. Where is that the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants jersey?
We made $200 off that thing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. One of my favorite. That was one of the best things ever, except for wearing it for a week. So listen, guys, thanks so much for listening. Do we have a guest lined up for next week, or we have anyone confirmed?
Not officially, but I'm working on it.
Okay, so Steve's working on a guest for next week. You can't say. Don't commit us.
No. Listen, do you or do you not want me to say who's on our show on a week-to-week basis?
It's not fair to them, because if they don't make it, then
it's not fair to me. Make me feel stupid. That's just my baseline.
I know
Jesse's
need to make me feel more stupid, because Jesse knows he can get under your skin in 3 seconds, so that's why he's needling you. But
the real winner of Adam versus me in a boxing match is Jesse. 100%. Jesse, just because we antagonize.
Yeah, I get to be the ref.
Yeah. Just anyway.
Both up.
I think we're excited for that. Exciting things in the pipeline. I certainly hope that there's going to be a season, and hopefully next week we'll be on talking about it. So until then, we'll see you next Wednesday. Have a great week. And by the way, shout out to everybody that had us featured in their Spotify Rap Report. We see you. I'm reposting every single one of them on Instagram, because thank you. It's flipping amazing. Some people as high as 13 or 14 days of their last year listening to this show. That's crazy. And people are it's you listen to 106 episodes. I'm like, we only produced I don't think we normally produce about 92 a year. And I don't even think we came close to that this year. It must be in the 70s or something.
some people legitimately in March were like, well, in this for the long haul. And they like started in 2013 and made their way up.
It was fun when Steve sent us his Spotify Wrapped, and it was at like 10,000 hours of the Steve Dangle podcast. I was like, oof, you really love yourself, Steve.
Yeah.
Sure do.
I actually
No,
I
that wasn't mine. God damn it.
It's just
He didn't do that.
it's just like his top 5 are Steve Dangle book, Steve Dangle book, Steve Dangle book, Steve
Dangle YouTube channel.
Yeah,
And what?
Sportsnet
what?
/ Steve Dangle.
And what?
Wow. Pretty great over here. Anyways. Anyway, guys. So what? What do you want to say?
I gotta go to the bathroom.
Okay, get the hell out of here. Love you. We'll see you Wednesday.
The Steve Dangle Podcast. Follow the guys on Twitter at Steve_Dangle, at Adam WYLDE, and at Jesse Blake. Connection complete.